What's going on, everyone? Phil here, and welcome to KO Gaming. In particular, this fall gaming season has been jam-packed with numerous high-profile AAA releases, in particular first-person shooters that are all vying for your attention and your hard-earned money. In fact, just in a 3-week span, there has been one new first-person shooter a week, all trying to get your attention. Titanfall 2 is the subject of this particular video, and it's the follow-up to 2014's Xbox One console exclusive, which was a run-and-gun, double-jump, wall-running mech combat hybrid game that really tried to stand out from the rest of the first-person shooter pack. Now, unlike that original game, Titanfall 2 is trying some things differently. First of all, including a full-length single-player campaign. Second, going cross-platform instead of just being an Xbox One exclusive, it's now also on PlayStation 4 and PC. And lastly, really trying to differentiate himself from what everyone else is doing and not offering any paid-for DLCs in the future, instead offering that all of their future content will be free. Is it enough to make Titanfall 2 worth your time and efforts? Let's find out in my review. We'll get to the multiplayer eventually, but first let's explore the single-player campaign of Titanfall 2, especially considering it's one of the major additions of this sequel. You play the role of a brand new rookie pilot for the Rebel Army. You're being trained to be working inside of one of these Titans, which is a large mechanized robot that you use for combat and such, and during your training missions you're interrupted and immediately thrown into combat. Unfortunately, things don't go very well, and the pilot of one of your Titans gets killed, and now you're off to find batteries in order to power up that Titan, jump inside, and rescue yourself from this kind of barren planet that's full of enemy mercenaries. Once you complete your objectives, you are thrown into a whirlwind campaign that spans all different locations throughout space, trying to figure out what exactly is going on with this army that's trying to basically take out all of the rebels. In addition, there's these mercenaries also driving mechs called the Apex Predators, who are actually more like large profile boss fights, and that is pretty much the premise of the campaign. Now, there is some uniqueness to this. There's certain stages that stand out from the pack. Instead of just being standard run and gun fare, you're also piloting your Titan in a lot of these stages. Unfortunately, I do have to say, it seems like the Titan is almost an afterthought. With most of the stages of the campaign of Titanfall 2, you're going to find yourself on foot, running and gunning, power sliding, double jumping, and in particular, wall running and platforming across different kinds of puzzles and objectives to try to get from point A to point B while you're taking out troops along the way and trying to complete whatever the game is telling you to do to progress on to the next section of the game. Now, not to say that there isn't any mech or Titan combat at all in the campaign, but it really is few and far between. 95% of the time, you're gonna be on foot, which is kind of disappointing considering that Titanfall really separates itself from the first-person shooter pack because of the mech combat. In fact, the most I think you're ever in your Titan is for one entire stage. Outside of that, maybe you'll get in it for 5 minutes at a time, but a lot of the times it's autopiloting itself, and it almost seems like the plot is purposely trying to separate you from the Titan for an excuse as to why you don't get to use it for most of the campaign, which can lead to some frustration. Now, not to say that the campaign isn't interesting. There's a few stages in particular that stand out that were really cool, including this one stage where they're actually manufacturing these buildings and almost like terraforming a planet, and you have to run and platform across all of these different things as they're being built and use them as ways to move across the factory as they're being moved across conveyors and hooks and the like, and that's pretty neat. But my favorite stage by far of the campaign is one where there's a time manipulation mechanic where you can go forward or backward in time to get past certain objectives. So if you see a door that's blocked by lasers, well, go forward in time after the building's been destroyed and you can easily get through that door. But if that doorway's blocked by fire, go back in time before the fire ever happened. And it's a pretty neat thing. Problem being, it's only ever utilized in this one stage. And once it's taken away and you end up continuing on with the campaign, you realize, man, that was a unique mechanic that I wish was actually part of the full game and not just utilized for 20 minutes and now it's gone for good. Ultimately, the campaign is pretty underwhelming. First of all, it's only 4 hours long. I'll say that again, yes, even if you really suck at it, the most it's going to take you to beat the campaign of Titanfall 2 is around 4 hours. Secondly, the boss fights, 90% of the time, are a joke. There are some bosses in this game that I instantly killed because I had a supercharged move stored up on my Titan. I just unloaded, and this big epic build build up to this boss fight where you got to hear this person talking throughout the entire stage just to see them instantly melt before me was pretty lame and pathetic. Now, the end of the game does have a few tougher boss fights. They follow pretty standard cliches for boss fights in video games. There's different waves of attack. You have to memorize the pattern. You have to dodge. There's going to be minions that spawn. And then ultimately there is an ending. Did I hate the campaign? Absolutely not. In fact, I would tell you that it actually feels kind of on par with the campaigns of older Call of Duty games, like Modern Warfare. And that's probably a good thing because we all look back and think of Modern Warfare with really great memories. However, it almost feels very cliche, like they're trying to literally copy the formula of what Call of Duty does with their campaigns. They try too hard to make you care about the characters of this campaign when you only see them for a very short period of time, and ultimately it falls flat on its face because who knows if we'll ever see these characters ever again. So, a 4-hour campaign, some pretty lame boss fights, you barely are ever in the Titan. It is a little bit of a letdown. It's nice that it's there. I definitely enjoyed playing through it once, but you're never going to have any motivation to go back and try it again, and then it's over. And so with a campaign that's kind of underwhelming, that leaves the rest of Titanfall 2 for your full retail purchase, the multiplayer. So much like the first game, even though this time around there is a campaign, the main focus is going to be the multiplayer for sure. So what is available at launch in Titanfall 2's multiplayer? Well, there are a plethora of modes, including Bounty Hunt, where it's you versus an enemy team, but there's also AI enemies that are little grunts and such that spawn all around the map, and every once in a while there'll actually be an AI-controlled Titan, which both teams are trying to destroy. When you kill the little grunts and those AI-controlled Titans, you accumulate points. Then, once the round is over, during set periods of time, you now have to go to what's called a bank to store any points or money that you've accumulated over the course of that time frame. By the way, if you get killed, it reduces the amount of money that you've earned by half. So not only do you have to be good at killing these AI-controlled opponents and fighting off the enemy team, you also have to avoid getting killed and be able to bank your points before you die so that you can accumulate enough to win the match. It's fun and it's unique until you start to get frustrated because there are players who've already found ways to camp at those bank points and find really cheap ways to kill you on your way to the bank. And there's nothing worse than playing for 5 or 10 minutes, completely dominating a match, than trying to go to a bank and getting killed at the last second, losing most of what you had earned. It makes me want to tear my goddamn hair out. Now there's also Amped Hardpoint, which is domination from any other first-person shooter. You're trying to control different areas of a map, and the difference here is that if you stay there for an extra long period of time, you actually earn double points. But it's pretty standard fare, it's domination at its core, you know the drill. There's also Pilots versus Pilots, a mode where there's absolutely no Titans involved whatsoever, but instead it's just mano a mano. I hate to say it, but this mode feels incredibly like recent installments of Call of Duty as of late, and it really doesn't add anything to it. I honestly don't even know why it exists, because the whole catch of Titanfall 2 is that you're trying to throw in mech combat tied in with the first-person shooter. When you remove the mechs, you've removed the uniqueness, and it really does feel like a Call of Duty ripoff. There's some other modes as well, including Attrition, where it's basically a team deathmatch style game, but you're also fighting AI opponents who you earn points for killing. This time around, though, you don't actually have to bank the points, which is a great thing. Now, there's a few other modes as well. They're not really necessary to mention, simply because Coliseum and the 1 or 2 other modes that are really available are really not played that much. In fact, I tried playing a few of these and had a hard time getting a match. The one that I actually liked the most, surprisingly, out of all the multiplayer modes was Last Titan Standing. This is a mode where everyone already spawns in their Titans and you only get 1 life. So basically it's a survival mode where once you die, you're out until the next round, and everyone really has to work together to win these matches. If you're a sniper class Titan, you hang back and you try to snipe, while the more up close and personal Titans will cruise in and try to get down and dirty right up in their face. It's pretty neat, and overall it is something very different from the rest of the other gameplay, where it really seems like your life is pretty expendable. In that mode, it's incredibly important to actually be good and careful, and that's what I like most about it. So being a sequel, you're going to ask, what's new in Titanfall 2's multiplayer that would make me want to buy it after playing Titanfall 1? Quite honestly, there's not a heck of a lot. I mean, yes, there's new weapons, there's new loadouts, there's going to be new upgrades for your Titans, but ultimately the game does feel almost 100% like the previous installment, the only real addition and exception being the grappling hook, which is what you saw in all the trailers. You can now use this grappling hook to pull yourself across the map, to launch yourself over buildings. You can even use it for melee attacks if you're really good with the aim. It's an instant kill, so I definitely like that. But outside of the grappling hook, the game plays almost identically to Titanfall 2, and by the way, you don't even have to equip it. So in a lot of ways, you could turn Titanfall 2 into Titanfall 1 if you just equip the same kind of loadouts and stuff from the first game, and it becomes incredibly similar. Another critique I really have is that there's only 6 kinds of Titans. And it really needs to be said, for a game where the only real gimmick between this and Call of Duty is that there's mechs, the fact that there's only 6 of them is incredibly limiting in my opinion. I really felt that maybe if there were 10 or 12 in a wide variety of gameplay styles, it would have been a lot better, but here you kind of got your standard fare. You got one that's got a machine gun and a shield, there's one that has a heavy machine gun, there's one that has more of a sniper class, and this is the one that I played with, where you can hover and you can actually charge your shots and do these aerial salvos of rockets down on your enemies once you're supercharged. There's a melee class that uses a sword, and it's nice, but ultimately they really feel like there's maybe only a handful of playstyles that you can do with these Titans, and I really wish that there was more variety to it. I think that they could have done a lot more with the Titans. Ultimately, only having a few weapons that have to cool down before you can use them, it doesn't feel anywhere near as complex as games like Hawken or even Mech Warrior that I've played in the past. I think that those games actually maybe did it a little bit better with the mech combat. And listen, I understand that they're trying to dumb it down for the masses, in particular because they are going for a Call of Duty audience being able to play in a mech game, but at the same time, when it feels so simple, and it really is simple, it doesn't really add much at all to the game. I said the same thing about the first Titanfall, and I kind of stick to it here. This game feels like they took 2 different franchises, they taped them together with duct tape, and then they said, here you go, without really having any real reason for the game to exist. Now, I'm not saying the game's not fun. In fact, in the 5 or so hours of multiplayer that I played launch week, I really enjoyed playing, and I actually was quite good at the game, most of the time placing at the top of the leaderboards of any kind of match that I was involved in. Don't ask me why I'm good at this game, because I'm actually not very good at first-person shooters in general, but for some reason I did really well at Titanfall 2. But ultimately, after playing for about 5 hours, I noticed something. I was getting bored, because I realized I've seen everything. That's right, Titanfall 2 only has 9 maps at launch. So once you've played for a few hours, you've already seen everything. And unlike some other first-person shooter offerings like Battlefield 1 as of recently, there's no widespread mode with 64 players that drastically changes the face of the multiplayer. It's always a relatively small amount of players, usually 5 versus 5 or 6 versus 6. It never gets any bigger. And I do have to say this, in general, the connection quality and the actual quality of the gameplay was pretty good. There was maybe one match that I experienced that seemed to have some latency and lag to it that was really making the shots not necessarily have hit detection that was very considerate for a competitive game. So that's a good thing, and I think that's maybe a testament to the fact that they kept the actual match sizes down to only, say, 10 or 12 players. But it does need to be said, I really did start to feel a little bit bored and like I was already running out of stuff to do in the game after about 5 hours. Now, of course, if you want to try every single Titan class, you want to unlock every single gun and test every single thing, you could probably get hundreds of gameplay hours out of Titanfall 2. But ultimately, how many people are going to be like that and get so hooked on this game, especially during a gaming season when you've got other games that are directly competing with it that seem to have much better hooks? I don't know. Ultimately, the question you have to ask yourself is there enough different about Titanfall 2 to make you buy this game amidst such a busy gaming season when you've got so many other direct AAA competitors putting out similar products? If you absolutely need the first-person shooter with mechs in it, then yeah, Titanfall 2 is your game. But ultimately, I think you're going to end up being pretty bored, at least a little bit more quickly with the game than, say, Battlefield 1, where you're playing on these huge scale maps and every match really does feel like a different experience because you're constantly going all over the place rather than just replaying the same small maps over and over and over. I certainly can't attest for Infinite Warfare because I haven't played it yet, but I'll tell you this, Titanfall 2 was fun for the first several hours, and then I started to get burnt out on it, just like I did with Titanfall 1. So again, is the campaign enough of a selling point? No, it's too easy, the bosses go down really easily, the game doesn't let you play with the mech enough, and it's only 4 hours long. The cool things about the campaign end too quickly, and it's really just kind of there to be there and say that it's there and now it's worth a $60 purchase, when in my opinion, I don't think that it added much at all to the game whatsoever. Ultimately, the selling point of Titanfall 2 is its multiplayer, and if you're looking for a fast-paced run-and-gun shooter with platforming and double jumping and wall running and this new grappling hook mechanic, and you think that it's fancy and fast-paced and you care about the small maps, that's cool, this is your kind of game. But ultimately, I think most people are probably going to be looking for something a little bit better than this. All factors considered, the one thing that I do want to bring up before I give you my review score is the fact that Titanfall 2 is promising free DLC in the future. Listen, that's an awesome thing. The problem, though, with promising free DLC is that it's not out yet, and I can't review Titanfall 2 as a game after the DLC's out. I'm reviewing it at release. So all I can tell you is right now, Titanfall 2 is fun for a while, and then it gets boring just like the first game. Maybe 6 to 8 months from now, if there's 2 or 3 free DLCs that triple the amount of maps available and add new whole game modes and mechs and different Titan classes and weapons, that could change. But at launch, the game is limited, and it does get played out after a while. So I have to review what's available now. I definitely think you should keep in mind there is free DLC coming, and that should factor into your decision. The other 2 games that are in direct competition with Titanfall 2 are both charging for additional DLC, but at launch, I really do think that Titanfall 2 is shallow, just like the original title. So I give Titanfall 2 a 6.75 out of 10, simply because I don't think it's worth the full retail price. Unless you get absolutely hooked on the multiplayer, I don't see this being a game that's going to have any kind of longevity whatsoever. Unlike Battlefield and Call of Duty, which typically have their fan bases and have that longevity, Titanfall 2 is still going to struggle, especially with its terrible release timing sandwiched between these 2 giant idols and monoliths of first-person shooter gaming. I really don't know what the hell they were thinking, but it's certainly not a bad game. It's a fun game for a while, but it's going to get played out in my opinion, and honestly, I think that at least Battlefield 1, which I've already played, is a much better game, so the score is what it is. Thanks for watching my review of Titanfall 2, everyone. I sure hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give this video a like on YouTube. Also, I'm going to be doing a lot more of this style of video shortly, so if you liked it, please consider subscribing to the channel, as well as spreading the word about KO Gaming amongst your friends. Please check the video description, where you can find links to my raw gameplay of Titanfall 2, including my playthrough of the campaign, as well as my multiplayer gameplay over on my raw gameplay channel, DSP Gaming. You can also find a Loot Crate referral link and discount code, as well as a link to my Patreon there. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time right here on KO Gaming.